The encounter. The evening sky was heavy with clouds and the wind carried the smell of rain. A young man named Arik walked slowly through the forest path, carrying a small bag of food in his hand. He often came here when the world felt too loud, too full of problems he could not fix. The forest was his quiet place. That day, however, something felt different. The air was too still, too silent. Even the birds were not singing. Arik stopped, listening carefully. He thought he heard a soft sound like someone breathing or maybe crying deep among the trees. He turned his head and saw movement. A shadow slipped between the thick trunks. His heart jumped. At first he thought it might be an animal. But then in the dim light he caught a glimpse of something else. Two figures. They were sitting near an old fallen log partly hidden by branches. One was tall, thin and wrapped in a ragged cloth that looked almost silver under the fading light. The other was much smaller, like a child, leaning weakly against the tall figure's side. Arik froze. He did not move forward and he did not run away. He simply watched. The taller figure raised its head and for a moment their eyes met. Arik felt his breath catch in his throat. Those were not human eyes. They were large, almost glowing, with a faint shade of blue. The taller one, the mother perhaps, held the child close and pulled her deeper into the shadows. They were afraid of him. Arik's mind raced. Were they people in costumes? Lost travelers or something else? His grandmother used to tell stories about strange beings from the stars, but he never believed them. Now, looking at the pair, he was not so sure. He slowly opened his bag and took out a piece of bread. He placed it on the ground a few steps away from him. Then he stepped back. "For you," he said softly, though he wasn't sure if they understood his language. There was no answer. Only silence. The mother's glowing eyes stayed on him, sharp and suspicious. The child shifted, making a faint whimper, and the sound made Arik's chest ache. Not wanting to scare them, he backed away even more. He left the bread there, turned around, and walked back toward the path. He did not look back until he was far enough. When he finally turned, the bread was gone. That night, Arik lay in his small home, staring at the ceiling. His heart was restless. He kept seeing those eyes glowing softly in the dark. He kept hearing the child's weak cry. They were out there alone, hungry and scared. The next day he returned. Again he carried food with him, this time bread, some fruit, and a bottle of water. He followed the same path, his ears sharp to every sound. When he reached the old log, the figures were there again. The child was curled up, looking even weaker than before. This time Arik placed the food closer. He did not speak, only set it down and slowly backed away. He waited, pretending to look at the trees. After some time he saw movement. The child stretched out a thin hand, her fingers long and delicate. She grabbed the bread quickly and pulled it close. Arik smiled, but the mother pulled the child back protectively. She looked at Arik with suspicion, as if warning him to stay away. Still, he felt something stir inside him. Pity, curiosity, a strange kind of connection. They were not monsters. They were a mother and her daughter trying to survive. He returned again the next day, and again after that. Every time he left food and water. Every time the food disappeared. Sometimes he caught the child peeking at him, her big glowing eyes filled with wonder. Sometimes he heard the mother whisper something in a language he could not understand, her voice low and musical, but also heavy with fear. Days passed like this. Arik grew used to the strange routine. His feet led him to the forest almost without thought. It became his secret world, a place where something extraordinary was quietly unfolding. But one evening, as he placed the food down and turned to leave, he felt something, a sharp prickle on his skin, like someone was watching him. He stopped and looked back. The bread was already gone faster than before, and behind the trees, two glowing eyes stared at him. Not with fear this time, but with a kind of silent question. For a long moment, the forest was still. The wind blew softly, the shadows deepened, and Arik felt his heart beat faster. He whispered into the quiet, "I'll come back tomorrow." Then he walked away, but he knew his life was no longer the same, because he had seen them, because they had seen him, and because a secret was growing in the shadows of the forest, one that could change everything. Silent. Arik's visits became a secret rhythm of his life. Each morning he went about his usual work, speaking to neighbors, pretending everything was normal. But in the evening, when the sun began to sink behind the trees, he would carry a small bundle of food and water and walk to the forest. The path was always the same, yet it never felt ordinary. The air there was different, quiet, expectant, as if the trees themselves were watching him. Each time, Arik placed the food near the fallen log and stepped back. He never rushed. He never tried to get too close. At first, there was nothing but silence, but he always felt it, the presence of eyes on him watching from the shadows. Some days he caught a glimpse of the child. She was thin, her face pale, her large eyes glowing faintly in the dim light. She would look at him for only a second before hiding again behind her mother's side. Other days he saw only movement, the flash of silver cloth or the curve of a hand that was not quite human. Arik wondered about them constantly. Who were they? Where did they come from? Were there more of them or only these two? His mind offered no answers, only more questions. But despite the mystery, one thing was certain. They were alive because of him. Without the food and water, the child might not have survived. That thought kept him coming back. The forest whispers one night as Arik made his way home after leaving food. He heard a strange sound above the forest. It wasn't thunder, though the sky was clear. It was low, like the hum of a giant machine passing in the distance. The sound faded quickly, leaving the night silent again. Arik froze, his heart racing. He had never heard anything like it. Was it connected to them, the mother and daughter? Was someone searching for them? He looked back toward the forest. The shadows seemed deeper than before. He felt certain the sound had something to do with them. The daughter's curiosity days passed, and the child began to change. She still hid behind her mother, but sometimes she peeked out for longer. Once, Arik saw her stretch out her hand toward him, though the mother pulled her back quickly. Another time, as Arik turned to leave, he heard a soft sound, like a laugh. He turned sharply but saw nothing. Still, he knew it was her. The child was curious about him. She wanted to know who he was, why he came every day, why he gave them food without asking for anything in return. Arik smiled at the thought. He wished he could tell her, because you remind me of family, because no one deserves to starve, because I want to help. The mother, however, remained distant. Her glowing eyes were sharp and filled with suspicion. Every time Arik came, she watched him like a hunter, ready to protect her child. Once, when he stepped a little closer than usual, she moved forward, standing between him and the child. Her stare was cold, and Arik stopped immediately. He lifted his hand slowly, showing he meant no harm. Then he placed the food down and backed away. Her eyes followed him until he disappeared into the trees. That night, Arik lay awake, thinking about her. She wasn't just a mother. She was a guardian, carrying the weight of survival on her shoulders. She didn't trust him yet, and maybe she never would. But he didn't blame her. If he were in her place, he would be the same. A bond in silence, Arik began to notice small changes. Once, when he left fruit, he found the peel carefully placed near the log as if returned to him. Another time, the bottle of water was set back, empty but upright. It was as though they were trying to communicate in their own quiet way. He smiled when he saw these little signs. They weren't speaking yet, but they were answering. The silence between them was not empty. It was a slow-growing bridge built from trust piece by piece. Shadows in the village, but outside the forest, life was not so quiet. One evening, at the local market, Arik overheard two men talking. "Strange lights in the sky again last night," one said. "Near the forest?" asked the other. "Yes. And some people say animals are missing. Goats, chickens. Something is out there." Arik felt a chill. He quickly walked away, pretending not to hear. But his heart was pounding. If more people started searching the forest, the mother and daughter would not be safe. That night, as he carried food, he moved carefully, checking the path for signs of others. His secret felt fragile, as if it could break at any moment. The silent question, on his 10th visit, something unexpected happened. As he placed the food down and stepped back, the child stepped forward. She looked at him, her glowing eyes wide, and then very softly whispered a single word. "Why?" The sound was faint, her accent strange, but the word was clear. Arik's heart leapt. It was the first time she had spoken to him. He knelt down slowly, keeping his voice gentle. "Because you need help." The child tilted her head as if trying to understand. Then she clutched the bread to her chest and ran back to her mother. The mother pulled her close, whispering something in a language Arik could not understand. Her eyes, however, were different this time. Still cautious but softer, Arik walked away that night with a strange feeling in his chest. The silence had been broken. And in that single word, why, he felt the beginning of something larger, something that could no longer be hidden forever. The first contact. The forest was dark that evening, darker than usual. Clouds covered the moon, and only a faint silver glow touched the leaves. Arik walked carefully, his hands holding the small bag of food as always. Yet tonight his heart was uneasy. Something was changing. He could feel it. For many days he had come and gone, leaving food in silence. The child's single whispered word, "Why?" still echoed in his mind. That voice was proof. They could speak. They could understand him. Tonight he hoped for more. The daughter steps forward. When Arik reached the fallen log, he placed the food down gently. Bread, fruit, and some dried meat. He stepped back as usual, waiting. For a moment nothing moved. Then, from the shadows, the child stepped forward. Her eyes glowed faintly blue in the darkness, and her small hands trembled as she picked up the bread. This time, however, she did not run back immediately. She looked at Arik. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice soft but clear. Arik's breath caught. He hadn't imagined it. She truly spoke his language, even if the words were broken and strange. "You're welcome," he said gently, afraid to scare her. He wanted to say more, but his throat felt tight. The child smiled faintly. It was small, uncertain, but real. For the first time, Arik saw her not just as a shadow or mystery, but as a child. Curious, fragile, alive. The mother appears, but the moment did not last. A shape rose from behind the log, tall and thin, wrapped in the silver cloth. The mother. Her glowing eyes fixed on Arik, sharp and cold. She stepped between him and her daughter, pulling the child close. Her voice came out low and firm in words that Arik did not understand. The sound was strange, musical, almost like singing, but filled with warning. Arik raised his hands slowly. "I won't hurt her," he said softly. "Or you." The mother's eyes narrowed. Then to his surprise she spoke again, this time in broken human language. "Stay. Away." The words were heavy, as if they cost her great effort. She tightened her grip on the child, her body tense. Arik saw fear in her eyes, but also strength. She was ready to fight if she had to. "I only want to help," Arik said. His voice was calm, steady. "You are not safe here. People are looking." Her eyes widened slightly at his words. For a moment Arik thought she might respond, but instead she pulled the child back into the shadows. A glimpse of pain. Arik stayed where he was, unsure whether to leave or wait. Then he noticed something. As the mother turned, the silver cloth shifted, and for a brief second he saw her arm. A long scar stretched across it, glowing faintly under the dim light. It didn't look like any wound Arik had ever seen. Not from fire. Not from metal. It looked like a burn, but too clean, too precise. The sight made his stomach twist. Someone, or something, had hurt her. The mother caught him staring and quickly covered the scar again. Her eyes blazed with warning. Arik lowered his head, ashamed for looking too closely. But inside he was more certain than ever. They weren't just hiding because they were different. They were hiding because they were hunted. Words in the dark that night. As Arik prepared to leave, he paused. He couldn't walk away in silence. Not this time. He turned back toward the shadows. "I'll keep bringing food," he said quietly. "As long as you need." For a long moment there was no answer. Then faintly he heard the child's small voice, "Come back." The words were broken, uncertain, but they filled Arik with warmth. He smiled. "I will." The village rumors. The next morning, in the village, Arik overheard people again. This time they were more serious. "Strange noises in the forest," a man said. "Not animals. Machines, maybe." "I heard they saw lights again," another replied. "If the government finds something there, they'll lock it down." Arik's chest tightened. Every word was a warning. If people kept talking like this, it was only a matter of time before search teams came. The mother and daughter would never survive that. He returned to the forest that evening with heavier steps. The secret he carried was no longer safe. The mother's warning. When he reached the log, the food was taken quickly. The child gave him a small nod of thanks, but the mother spoke again. "You, dangerous," she said. Her voice was sharp, but beneath it was fear. "If they, no, you, die." Arik shook his head. "I'm not afraid." I won't tell anyone. The mother's eyes studied him, searching for lies. Then she said nothing more, pulling her daughter close once again. Arik wanted to say more, to ask where they came from, what happened to them. But the words died on his lips. It wasn't time yet. Instead, he simply whispered, "Tomorrow," and turned to leave. The forest watches. As he walked away, he felt the same prickling sensation he had felt before. The air was heavy, charged, as if something unseen was watching. He stopped and turned, scanning the dark trees. For a brief second, he thought he saw movement high above, among the branches, a flicker of silver. Then it was gone. His heart pounded. Was it them following him? Or was it something else, something searching for them? The forest gave no answers, but Arik knew one thing. The wall of silence between him and the strange mother and daughter had cracked. Words had passed. Trust had begun, and once the first words are spoken, nothing can stay hidden forever. Their secret. The nights grew colder, and the forest darker, but Arik kept coming. Each visit felt heavier, as though an invisible rope tied him to the mother and daughter. He couldn't stay away. By now they no longer hid completely. The child sometimes stood in the open, clutching bread with her long, delicate fingers. The mother watched from nearby, her glowing eyes sharp. But she no longer pulled the girl back the instant Arik appeared. Something was changing between them. Trust was thin, fragile like glass, but it was there. A faint voice. One evening, as Arik set down a flask of warm soup, the child looked at him and spoke again. "What name?" she asked, her accent heavy. Arik felt a spark of joy. She wanted to know him. "My name is Arik," he said gently. He pointed to himself, repeating, "Arik." The girl tilted her head, then pointed at herself. "Lyra," she said softly. The word rolled off her tongue like music. Arik repeated it. "Lyra." She smiled. A real smile this time, though faint and shy. Before he could ask more, the mother's voice cut through the air. "No," Arik froze. The mother stepped closer, her silver cloth brushing the leaves. Her voice was firm, broken but clear. "No, talk, not safe." Lyra's smile faded and she bowed her head, but her glowing eyes lingered on Arik, full of curiosity. Broken words. Days later, the silence cracked again. The mother, though cautious, began to answer Arik's questions in short, broken words. He learned little pieces, enough to form a picture, though not the whole story. "Ship. Fall," she said one night, pointing toward the sky. Her voice carried pain, and her scar seemed to burn brighter in the moonlight. "Home. Gone." Arik's chest tightened. They weren't from here. They had crashed, stranded on Earth, far from whatever place they once belonged. "Others?" he asked carefully. "More like you?" The mother's face darkened. Her lips pressed into a thin line. She shook her head slowly. "No, only us." The weight of her words sank deep. They were alone. The child's illness. Arik noticed Lyra weakening as the days passed. She often coughed softly, her small body trembling as she tried to eat. The mother held her close, her eyes burning with worry. Arik brought herbs, medicine from the village, and warm blankets, though he wasn't sure if they would help. Still, the mother accepted them in silence. One night, while wrapping the blanket around Lyra, Arik whispered, "She's sick. She needs more than food." The mother's eyes flickered with fear. Not like you," she said, her voice low. "Medicine? Not same." Arik felt helpless. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. What did Lyra need? What kept her alive? But the mother's guarded expression stopped him. A glimpse of their world one night when the air was clear and the stars glittered brightly. Arik stayed longer than usual. The mother sat with Lyra near the fallen log, thinking he had already gone. But he lingered quietly in the shadows, not wanting to leave. Then he heard the mother's voice, soft and low, singing in her own language. The sound was unlike anything he had ever heard, melodic, layered, like many voices at once. He stepped closer, and through the gaps in the trees, he saw her raise her hand to the sky. Her silver cloth slipped, and for a moment he glimpsed strange markings on her skin. They glowed faintly, forming patterns like constellations. Lyra lifted her small hand too, mimicking her mother, their glowing eyes fixed on the stars. Arik's heart pounded. This was not just survival. This was memory, a ritual, a connection to a home they had lost. He felt like an intruder but could not look away. Then suddenly the mother stopped. Her eyes snapped to the trees, sensing his presence. Go, she said sharply, her voice like stone. Nazi. Arik raised his hands. I'm sorry. I didn't mean, but her glare silenced him. He stepped back, guilt heavy on his shoulders. The weight of secrets that night lying awake, Arik thought of what he had seen. The glowing patterns, the song, the way they reached for the stars. They weren't just lost. They were grieving. They had a world, a people, a life beyond Earth. And it was gone. The secret he carried now felt larger, heavier. Not only were they hiding from humans, they were hiding their pain, their past, their truth. And somehow, Arik was part of it. A warning in the dark. The next evening, as he brought food again, the mother stepped closer than before. Her glowing eyes locked onto his, and her voice was sharp. You... danger, she said. If they find... us... kill... Arik swallowed hard. I won't tell anyone. She studied him for a long time. Then in a softer tone she added, not only you, others... searching. Arik's chest tightened. The strange sounds in the sky, the rumors in the village, it was all connected. Someone else was looking. And not just the curious villagers, someone dangerous. The bond deepens. Despite the warning, Arik kept returning. He could not stop. Lyra's smile, faint as it was, pulled him back. The mother's guarded words, the fragments of their story, kept his curiosity burning. One night as he turned to leave, Lyra reached out suddenly, her small hand brushing his. Come. Tomorrow, she whispered. Arik looked at her fragile form, her glowing eyes shining with trust. He nodded slowly. I'll be here. The mother said nothing, but she did not pull Lyra back this time. She simply watched, her eyes unreadable. As Arik walked away, the forest seemed alive with secrets. He knew now, this was more than kindness, more than food. It was the beginning of something he could no longer walk away from. Growing bonds, the days passed and Arik's life began to change without him even realizing it. His mornings in the village felt normal, work, market, small talk. But each evening his thoughts pulled him back to the forest. That was where his heart stayed, among the shadows, where two lives depended on him. He no longer saw his visits as a choice. They were a responsibility. Lyra, with her weak smile and glowing eyes, needed him. And the mother, though cautious, no longer treated him as only a stranger. She did not trust him completely, but her silence was less sharp now, her eyes less hostile. It was not friendship yet, but it was something close. A shared meal one evening, Arik carried more than usual. Instead of just bread and fruit, he brought a pot of stew, still warm, wrapped carefully to keep the heat inside. When he set it down, Lyra stepped forward with bright eyes, her small hands trembling with excitement. The mother hesitated, watching him closely, but she did not stop her daughter this time. She even allowed Arik to sit a short distance away as they ate. Lyra dipped her strange fingers into the stew, tasting it carefully. Her eyes widened. She smiled and gave a soft laugh, a sound so light it warmed Arik's chest. For the first time he heard the mother speak in a gentler tone. Good, she said slowly, pointing to the food. Arik nodded. Yes, good. It was a small moment, but to Arik, it felt like the forest itself had shifted. The silence between them was no longer filled with suspicion. It was beginning to fill with something else. Connection. Lyra's laughter. As the days grew longer, Lyra began to show more of herself. Her sickness lingered, but she had bursts of energy. She would walk a little, explore the area around the log, and sometimes mimic Arik's movements. One afternoon she picked up a stick and tried to copy the way he carved small patterns into wood. Her hands were clumsy, but her laugh rang clear when the stick snapped. Arik laughed too, and for a brief moment the forest felt alive with joy. The mother, sitting nearby, did not smile, but her glowing eyes softened as she watched her daughter laugh. Arik saw it, the love of a parent, the kind that crossed every boundary, human or not. Quiet conversations. Though the mother still spoke little, her words grew longer. Arik learned her name one night, though she spoke it reluctantly, as if it was a secret she rarely gave away. "Seren," she said, her voice low. Arik repeated it softly. "Seren." Her eyes flickered, but she said nothing more. Still, the sound of her name stayed with him, echoing in his thoughts. Serene. The mother who carried scars, the guardian of a fragile child, the stranger who was slowly becoming less of a stranger. Shadows of danger, but the bond forming between them did not erase the danger. In the village, whispers grew louder. People spoke of strange lights, of missing animals, of government vans seen on the main road. One man claimed to have heard voices in the forest, voices that were not human. Arik listened quietly, pretending disinterest, but inside his stomach twisted. The net was closing in. That night when he returned to the forest, Seren was waiting. She stepped forward before he could place the food down. "You, here," she said sharply. "They search." Arik nodded. "Yes, but I won't let them find you." Serene's eyes burned with doubt. "You cannot stop them." Arik had no answer. He knew she was right. Yet, as he looked at Lyra smiling faintly behind her, he felt a fire rise inside him. Somehow, he had to protect them. The first touch of view. Trust one evening, when the wind was cold, Arik gave Seren a blanket he had taken from his own bed. She hesitated, touching the fabric as if it were something precious. "Why, give?" she asked. Arik's answer was simple. "Because you need it." She stared at him for a long time, her glowing eyes unreadable. Then, slowly, she draped the blanket around Lyra's shoulders. It was the first time Serene accepted something without suspicion. The first time she let down her guard, even for a moment. Arik knew then. He had crossed a line. He was no longer just a stranger who brought food. He was becoming part of their fragile world. The van in the night one night, as Arik left the forest, he heard something that made his blood run cold. The low rumble of an engine, moving slowly along the nearby road. He hid behind the trees and saw it. An unmarked van, its headlights dimmed, creeping along the path. Inside, he caught the faint outline of men, their faces serious, their eyes scanning the forest. Arik's heart pounded. They were searching. He waited until the van passed, then hurried back toward the village, his mind racing. He had to warn Seren and Lyra. The danger was closer than ever. A promise in the dark. The next evening, when he brought food, Arik did not leave it silently. He looked at Seren and spoke firmly. "You must be careful. They are coming closer." Seren's eyes darkened. She pulled Lyra closer and whispered something in her own language. Arik stepped closer, lowering his voice. "I promise I'll keep coming. I'll help you, whatever it takes." For the first time, Seren did not answer with suspicion or anger. She simply stared at him, her face unreadable, before giving a slow nod. It was not full trust, but it was enough. The bond grows stronger. Arik walked home that night. The forest no longer felt like just trees and shadows. It felt like a boundary between two worlds, his world and theirs. And with every visit, that boundary was thinning. He didn't know what the future would bring. He didn't know if he could protect them. But he knew one thing. He could no longer imagine life without Lyra's faint smile or Seren's watchful eyes. The bond was growing, stronger with each day. And bonds, once formed, are not easily broken. The decision, the forest no longer felt safe. Each evening when Arik walked down the familiar path, he carried not only food, but also fear. The sound of engines still echoed in his mind, the van with the men who searched the trees. He had told Seren and Lyra to be careful, but words were not enough. Something had to change. Uneasy silence. That night, when Arik reached the fallen log, the air was heavy with silence. Lyra did not run forward like before. Seren stood with her, daughter pressed tightly against her side, her glowing eyes sharp and restless. Arik placed the food down but did not step back. He stayed, his jaw tight, his heart pounding. "They're coming closer," he said firmly. "The searchers. I saw them again last night." Seren's lips pressed into a thin line. She spoke slowly, her broken words edged with fear. "We go soon." Arik's chest tightened. The thought of them vanishing into the night, lost forever, twisted inside him. He could not let that happen. The daughter's plea Lyra tugged gently at her mother's arm. Her glowing eyes looked at Arik, filled with silent longing. "Arik," she whispered, her voice weak but clear. The sound of his name on her lips pierced him. It was not just gratitude, it was trust. Seren tried to hush her, but Lyra shook her head. "He help," she said. "He's safe." Seren's eyes burned with conflict. She held her daughter close, as if afraid she would slip away. Arik's bold words, Arik felt the decision rise inside him. Heavy, but unstoppable. He stepped closer, his voice steady, though his heart raced. "Don't run," he said. "Don't hide in the forest anymore. Come live with me." The words hung in the air like fire. Seren froze. Her eyes widened in shock, her body stiff as stone. Even Lyra seemed stunned, her glowing eyes flicking between her mother and Arik. Arik continued, his voice calm but urgent. "You can't survive like this. It's only a matter of time before they find you. In the forest you'll be hunted, but with me, maybe we can keep you safe." The mother's fury. For a long moment, Seren said nothing. Then her voice broke through, sharp and fierce.
"No," she snapped. "Not safe, never safe, you foolish—"
Her words cut through the air like blades. She stepped forward, her eyes blazing, her scar glowing faintly beneath her cloth. "You bring danger. You bring death," she hissed. "Humans." "Not accept, never." Arik did not flinch. He stood his ground, meeting her burning gaze. "I know," he admitted. "I know they won't understand. But I don't care. I don't want to lose you." Seren's body stiffened. His words had struck something deep, though her face remained hard. A shadow in the distance before Seren could respond. Lyra gasped and pointed. Arik turned sharply. Through the trees in the distance, a faint light glowed, white and searching, sweeping slowly across the dark forest. A spotlight. Arik's blood went cold. The searchers were here. He crouched low, his voice urgent. "They're close. You can't stay here tonight." Seren pulled Lyra against her chest, her eyes darting with fear. For the first time, Arik saw her mask of strength tremble. The choice presses closer. Arik leaned forward, his voice sharp but quiet. "You have two choices. Run into the dark, hunted again. Or come with me now." Seren shook her head fiercely. "No trust. No human safe," Arik's voice broke, full of raw honesty. "Then trust me. Not humans, just me." The light in the distance grew brighter, sweeping closer through the trees. The sound of footsteps followed, heavy and deliberate. Seren's eyes darted between the light and Arik. Lyra clung to her mother, her small body trembling. "Please," Lyra whispered. "Mama, please." The breaking point, Seren's body shook as she held her daughter close. Her glowing eyes filled with pain and fear. For years, perhaps, she had been running, hiding, fighting to keep her daughter alive. Now she was being asked to do the one thing harder than running. Trust. The light swept closer, so close that the beams brushed the nearby trees. Arik grabbed Seren's hand suddenly, his grip firm, his voice desperate. "If you stay here, they'll find you. If you run, you'll be hunted again. If you come with me, you have a chance." Her hand trembled in his, but she did not pull away. A fragile agreement at last. Seren gave a slow, pained nod. Her lips pressed tightly, her eyes full of storm, but her decision was made. "Go," she whispered. "Now," Arik exhaled in relief. He lifted Lyra into his arms, the child's body light and weak against him. Seren followed close, her silver cloth brushing against the leaves. They slipped quietly through the trees, moving away from the sweeping lights. Every step felt like a stolen second, every rustle of leaves like a warning. Toward a new world, at last, they reached the edge of the forest. Beyond it lay the dirt path that led toward the village, toward Arik's small home. Seren stopped, her eyes fixed on him, her voice low but sharp. If lie? Arik met her gaze without fear. I won't. She searched his face for a long, heavy moment. Then at last she gave another slow nod. Together they stepped out of the shadows. The Watcher, but as they left the forest behind, a figure lingered far in the distance. A man stood at the edge of the trees, half hidden, watching them. In his hand was a small device that blinked with a red light. He spoke into it softly, his voice calm. Target located, moving into the village. Then he disappeared into the shadows. The choice. The night air was cold as Arik led Siren and Lyra toward his small home. Every step felt heavier than the last. Behind them the forest grew darker, as if swallowing their secret. Ahead lay the village, a place of danger but also the only shelter he could offer. Lyra's head rested against Arik's shoulder. She was weak but calm, her glowing eyes half closed. Serene walked close, her silver cloth wrapped tightly around her, her every step filled with tension. She did not speak, but her gaze darted constantly, watching the shadows. Into the village Arik's house was simple. A wooden door, 2 small windows, and a roof that leaked during heavy rain. It was not much, but it was his. When he pushed the door open, the warmth of the fire greeted them. He set Lyra down on his bed, wrapping her in a blanket. The glow in her eyes dimmed slightly, but she managed a small smile. Siren stood near the door, her tall frame rigid, her eyes fixed on every corner of the room as though expecting a trap. You safe here, Arik said quietly. Serene's reply was sharp. Now safe, tomorrow, maybe not. Her words cut the silence. She was right. This was no permanent refuge, but for tonight it was shelter, a family's shadow in the dim light. The 3 of them shared a strange, fragile peace. Lyra ate the stew Arik offered, sipping it slowly. Siren did not eat but kept her glowing eyes on her daughter, her scarred hand resting protectively on her shoulder. Arik sat close, watching them. In that moment his small house no longer felt empty. For the first time in years it felt alive, but the peace was fragile. Arik could not shake the memory of the figure in the forest, the red light blinking in the dark. Someone had seen them. Someone was already following. The knock at the door. The peace broke sooner than expected. Late that night, just as the fire began to fade, there was a knock at the door. 3 hard raps, slow and deliberate. Siren tensed instantly, pulling Lyra close. Her glowing eyes sharpened like blades. Arik rose slowly, his heart pounding. Stay quiet, he whispered. He stepped to the door and opened it just a crack. A man stood outside, dressed in dark clothes. His eyes were cold, and in his hand he held a small device that blinked faintly red. Strange time for guests, the man said softly. Mind if I come in? Arik's stomach twisted. This was no villager. The threat. The man pushed the door wider and stepped inside without waiting for an answer. His eyes flicked to Siren and Lyra immediately, and a thin smile curved his lips. So it's true, he said. You've been hiding them. Arik moved quickly, stepping between him and the others. Leave, he said firmly. The man chuckled, shaking his head. No, you don't understand. They aren't safe here. Not for you. Not for anyone. They belong to us. His hand brushed the device at his belt, and a sharp beep echoed through the small room. Serene hissed, her glowing eyes flaring. Arik could feel the tension in the air, the storm about to break. The mother's stand Serene stepped forward suddenly, her silver cloth falling back to reveal the glowing markings on her arms. Her voice rang out, strong and clear despite her broken words. No take. No harm, she mine. The man's smile faded. He reached into his coat, pulling out a small weapon, something sleek and black, humming faintly with energy. Arik's heart raced. He had no weapon, no way to fight, but he could not step aside. He spread his arms wide, blocking the man's view of Siren and Lyra. You'll have to go through me first, he said, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at him. The choice. The man's weapon hummed louder. Then you'll die with them, he said coldly. Time seemed to freeze. Lyra clung to her mother, her small voice trembling. Mama, no. Siren's glowing eyes burned with fire. For years she had run, hidden, and lived in fear. But now, with her daughter trembling behind her and a human standing between them, something inside her shifted. She raised her hands, the markings on her skin glowing brighter, until the small house was filled with light. The man staggered back, shielding his eyes. His device beeped wildly. Arik felt heat rush through the air, a force pressing against his chest. Seren's power was alive, fierce, unstoppable. Go, she thundered. The man stumbled out the door, falling into the dirt outside. He scrambled to his feet and ran into the night, his weapon clattering from his hand. Aftermath. The light faded slowly, leaving only the soft crackle of the dying fire. Arik stood frozen, his chest heaving. Seren lowered her hands, her body trembling with exhaustion. Lyra clung to her tightly, whispering in their strange language. Arik looked at Seren, his voice low. You saved us. Her eyes flickered toward him. No, she said softly, we saved each other. A new path that night. As dawn crept over the horizon, Arik sat at the doorway, watching the first light spill across the fields. Seren and Lyra rested inside, wrapped in blankets, safe for now. But he knew the man would return. He would not come alone next time. Arik's decision was clear. Hiding was no longer enough. Running was no longer enough. They had chosen him and he had chosen them. Whatever danger came, whatever fight lay ahead, he would face it. Not as a stranger. Not as a rescuer, but as family.